make the comment is that the concept of entropy in assembly are very intrinsically connected, and I think the problem of entropy is that people are misusing again, same way that the underlying philosophy of quantum mechanics is not consistent. Same with entropy, and so people, if I take the entropy of my son's bedroom, some days it appears a bit worse than others, but actually, if you think about it, when my son's argument is like, "No, I've cleaned it up," it's like, and he's like, the same number of things are in here. And actually, if you think about it, the entropy, when people use this kind of, I'm going to put cream in and some coffee and look at the dissipation and say the entropy increases, that's actually incorrect. And there is a problem with that notion because people don't think in time about, I'm going to take a snapshot and calculate the entropy of this object and calculate this other entropy. And if I'm counting in terms of disorder, I have to subjectively add in a frame of reference to get that. So the thing with assembly is that causation is built into the object, so it's not subjective. So what I'm really excited about is bringing more material objectivity to time, and then using the tools of entropy as a readout for certain things. It's not that entropy is wrong; it's when it's subjective, it's very hard for us to use it across domains and across thought experiments in a way that is meaningful, because we get deeply confused about, some people say that life is an entropy generator or an entropy reducer. I mean, it's like, no, life is a process of which causation emerges from the maelstrom of no causation and wants to persist as long as possible. And because it's undergoing evolution, it gets more complicated because there's more fighting for that resource. And so we have this very interesting kind of ontological gaps that we are kind of, I'm not sure how deep they go, but I want to basically bring a new framing to that. But there's so many points there, but I agree with you, Sarah, about clock time and assembly time.
I think you're being more generous to entropy than I would be, though, in terms of people's use of it. And I just want to say, like, one of my allergic reactions I have intellectually, like when I get really annoyed, especially lately, because it's just becoming more and more apparent to me how often we do it. So it's not like it's just kind of pervasive intellectually, is that we're constantly invoking theoretical concepts that the universe itself could not implement. I guess maybe I had this like kind of instilled in me very early because my postdoc mentor, Paul Davies, wrote a lot about like what the laws of physics actually, like, could they be implemented? And this is also part of Nick Gizon's work, and Leitz Molin's talked a lot about this. But
I'm going to talk to Paul Davies soon.
Oh, great. Paul's great.
Yeah.
You can tell him I said hi, but I see him all the time. But anyway, he's great. But he's thought a lot about that. But in the context of entropy, it's like when you get to, like the concepts of statistical physics and entropy in particular are not actually well posed, I think, for biological systems. Because if you think about the statistics that you actually have to iterate over to talk about, the actual possibility space of a protein, for example, like the universe cannot explore all of those possibilities ever, period. So how is it meaningful to actually invoke things in your theories that are actually not physically accessible to the universe itself? And we do this all the time in physics, like the laws of physics exist outside of the universe. And like there's all kinds of these weird pathologies that exist in our mathematics that are not actually physically instantiatable. And I think Lee and I think about this a lot. And basically what we're trying to build is a theory that's self-consistent with its physical instantiation. And this is actually a really hard criteria for a theory to have. I don't know. We've never talked about it being described that way. So Lee, you can correct me if you want. But like I
think the thing that is really important, right, and all of that is we have to be self-consistent. And Sarah's superpower is really thinking about the self-consistency of what we're doing. But also, and that again gives us our framework for them pushing and say, the theory does this. It makes a courageous, if you like, or not courageous. I mean, Dave Deutsch calls them courageous, or Karl Popper actually says courageous. It makes a non-trivial statement about an experiment you can do, and you can go do it. And no other theory does that. And then you can then go back and say, look, I've made the theory suggested this new thing that no other theory has suggested. I've just gone and measured it. And look, it's kind of cool. Take relativity and kind of was it Eddington who was doing the measurements on the eclipse? Assembly theory and assembly index and all these things that we were doing. It's kind of that is really for me my grounding as an experimentalist. If I can't conceptually come up with a new experiment that tells me something new that I can wave at people and say, argue with that, then because then for me that is really exciting in conjunction with the frameworks you were discussing, Sarah. I think together they're really important. But that was all the thing I wanted to add.